Actually, one of the enjoyable things about this symposium is both the topics that are here, but the fact that it talks about some of these really wonderful places where things are found. And it's not only that there's discussion about where they were found and, this mine or that mine or the other, but a number of the people in the audience have either given talks or in the audience are the people that are responsible for these very, very famous locations. And of course, from my experience, the two that go along with my gemstone collecting era are the two tourmaline locations that are just the world famous. You don't have to say much about them. You say, well, what's the best American or world-class tourmaline location that is so well known? And the person that is responsible for it, Bill Larson, and the tourmaline queen is here. And Brian Swoboda, whose father was involved in it, is here. And it's just amazing that such close proximity to the people who were instrumental in getting these locations to become the world famous locations they are, such as the ones that you just heard about, and including the one that you're going to hear about now, which is perhaps the most famous pocket of material ever found. And it's one you just hear rumors about. Well, it's, the crystals were this big and that big, and they were this red, and they're this value, and it's, a 1,000-pound crystal at $170 per carat is, let's see, 1,000 pounds times how many grams per ounce and how many carats per gram, and it's a lot of money. So we're going to hear now from Richard Freeman, but Richard is also the person that brought to light the famous emerald that's in Texas now, also the huge emerald. When I remember looking at that location or hearing about the location, the main thing you hear about are little hiddenite crystals, which are about half an inch long and a quarter-inch diameter or something like that. And they found this big, wonderful emerald crystal. And now he will talk about the Jonas mine, perhaps the most famous collecting pocket in the world.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Gene. My name is Richard Freeman. I've been a gem dealer and mineral dealer, principally of materials from Brazil, for the last 40 years. Throughout my travels, I've been lucky enough to have seen some of the most beautiful, incredible minerals ever found. And one of the discoveries that I'm pleased to present to you today is probably the best ever. But first, a little history. In 1978, Paula, in 1978, my business partner, Jim Elliott, and I decided to travel to Brazil to really learn the gemstone business from the inside, from the source. As we were preparing for our trip, we made a quick visit to Boston to see a client who was a major collector of Maine tourmalines. When we told him we were headed for Brazil, he became very excited and told us of a new find of rubellite tourmaline near the city of Governador Valadares in the state of Minas Gerais in Brazil. They'd found beautiful and gigantic crystals there, and he insisted that should be our first stop on our trip to Brazil. Given his enthusiasm, we listened to our friend and headed straight for Valadares. Once we arrived there, we were informed that the Rio Doce, which is a river that runs through the town, had flooded and caused major damage to the town. And to raise money for disaster relief, Jonas de Souza Lima, the owner of the rubellite tourmaline mine, had placed the 4 largest crystals from the mine on display in a tent. And for $5 US, you could go in and spend as much time as you wanted. So we went to meet Jonas and see the amazing find for ourselves. When I entered the tent, I couldn't believe what was standing before me, a sight never to be forgotten. It was truly the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. and in that moment sparked a deep passion for tourmalines that has lasted all these years. And indeed, the name of my business is EF Watermelon. There's a reason. The crystals, known as the Four Grandfathers, were gorgeous. They were lustrous and huge and filled the room with powerful, commanding energy. The fantastic biterminated rubellite crystals, all in matrices of blades of clevelandite and crystals of lepidolite and quartz, were just gorgeous and a deep cranberry color, something we'd never seen before. Walking into the tent and seeing the Four Grandfathers for the first time, it's a visual that I never forgot and a story I've retold numerous times. We were in awe of what we saw before our eyes and thrilled to meet Jonas, the man behind the spectacular crystals. So this is the area of the pegmatite layer, and it covers really the whole 90% of the eastern part of Minas. And of course, you've already seen this. And this area is also the greater part of the trip where you see this arrow right here, is that. And then this is the area of the pegmatites. So they started digging, and let's see. The alt is up here, and this was the tailings area here. And these were some of the galpieros that did the work, and this was the site. And this was where it looked for the year that they were there, year and a half almost. The year has ended. Jonas is done. Ailton keeps telling him, we're coming, we're close, I can taste it, it's there. He says, I'm done, I'm not putting another penny into it. One more month, no, I'm done. So Ailton went to somebody else in Valadares who gave him enough money to go for another year, another month. And of course, that money went gone. So Ailton went back to Jonas and said, listen, I can feel it, it's coming, I can see, I'm hitting small pockets with lepidolites, I know we're close. And Jonas says, well, you sell your Volkswagen Bug, and I'll match the proceeds, and then you'll have enough money for another week or so. 3 days later, they found the richest pocket ever found of any gem material in history. The pocket is what you see here. Ailton had hit a small pocket that was filled with sand and water and some black schorl, and felt as he looked around the pocket that the water had to be coming in through the ceiling. So maybe there was another pocket above that. And so he had a couple of the guys chisel a hole in the ceiling. And of course, it popped through. And one of the guys said, well, you know, I'm pretty sure, and it was this guy right there, I'm pretty sure I saw something red tumble out. So immediately, Ailton went there, saw what was going on, said, everybody go home. And he himself chiseled a bigger hole so he could get his head up and his arm and a flashlight into what seemed to be a bigger pocket above. And he turned on the light, and this is what he saw. This was a pocket that was 9 feet tall, 6.5 feet wide, by 11 feet deep. And in that were some of the largest crystals ever found. In the ceilings, on the walls, in the floor. He immediately closed up the mine and called Jonas. Ran to a phone, called Jonas. Jonas had an 80-kilometer drive from Valadares. By the time he gets there, they're just so excited. They decide to lay a charge to gain entrance into the pocket. They lay 2 sticks of dynamite and blow a big hole that did not disturb the pocket, but allowed them to walk into it, standing up into the pocket, which they did, crunching crystals under their feet. Jonas had to take 2 tranquilizers to deal with just standing there. He just couldn't handle it. So there was lots of elbite, lots of clevelandite, lots of lepidolite, and then these pristine stones. Most crystals that are found in pockets are covered with mud or covered with other materials that keep you from seeing their color. These were pristine, just the way you see it, just the way Wendell Wilson painted this, is how the pocket looked when they looked in when they walked into the pocket. Jonas called his wife, which is, of course, what you have to do, and Donna Edma came with her son Jonina, and they arrived and began immediately to process of removing all the tourmaline crystals from the pocket and preparing them to be brought back to Valladares. The image of the reconstruction of the Bamboro pocket as it possibly looked when first discovered, the painting was done by Wendell Wilson, commissioned by Keith Proctor for his 1985 article for the GIA journal Gems and Gemology. Now, the 4 grandfathers were first to be found. Of the first to be found was the Tarugo, which was right there, and it's this stone here. This is Jonas Lima. This is Tony Camp, who was at that time was the curator of LA County. He's now the past curator. And this is a bigger shot of the Tarugo, complete with its quartz crystal and beautiful little tourmalines coming out of that. But you can see Jonas has got his rose-colored glasses, and he's got his green leisure suit, and this is the way I've met him, and in every subsequent meeting over the years, that's what he was wearing. Then the Jonina came, named after his son. That's this piece here. 2 huge rubellite crystals in clevelandite and lepidolite and some quartz. And it was found on the ceiling here, which was 9 feet above them. They got truck tires and car tires and stacked them all the way to the ceiling, chiseled it out. Now this weighed 352 kilos, 700 pounds. And they brought it down and kept it perfectly intact. Everything about it was perfect. Next came the fleur-de-lis. And that's this piece, gorgeous. It weighed 46 kilos with clevelandite and quartz and a beautiful 35 centimeter long crystal. Just gorgeous. And that was down there. And then finally, the rocket, the Fogat. That's this piece, 107 centimeters long. But it was found in 3 pieces, more than likely because of a pocket rupture, not because of the explosive, because they had already started to recrystallize on each of the broken sections. However, they were able to get it put together, and Littleton went out to buy some new clothes so he could be photographed with this piece, which went around the world. But it was just incredible. So after the intense 48 hours, the entire pocket had been emptied and all the materials were packed and transported to Jonas's warehouse in Valladares. Word of the find quickly spread, even though he had sworn everybody to secrecy. So then Jonas had to make sure it was known that there were armed men, explosives, and poisonous snakes ready to interfere with anybody that got any ideas. He was quoted in the May 10th, 1978 issue of the Journal de Tarde newspaper saying, "I confess that I'm a nervous wreck. What I'm going through is no joke. I refuse to say anything about the value of the tourmalines. I will only say that they are wonderful, something unbelievable, and they make those who understand precious stones feel faint with emotion." After 2 years, the majority of all the crystals were sold off and consumed by the world. In total, it's estimated there were 8,000 pounds of mineral specimens, 450 pounds of fine faceting rough, with a value in 1980 dollars of $50 million. Jonas has said the discovery left him a nervous wreck for the rest of his life. One interesting thing that I noticed over the years of subsequent visits was that he was always wearing a green leisure suit and rose-colored glasses. The same thing he wore the first time I met him. It was almost as if once he saw the rubellites, he needed to see everything with a red tint. As I mentioned earlier, the crystals started to resurface in 2000s. First, the fleur-de-lis showed up at the Peabody at Harvard, a gift from Ross and Jean Myron. And after that, a few years later, it became known that the Mineral Trust, and most of us know who that is, purchased the Jonina and the Rocket. But there were no signs of the fourth grandfather, Tarugo. And for many years, every subsequent trip to Brazil, every trip to Valadares, every buy that we made, we always asked about rubellites. Are there any more Jonas rubellites? Nobody had anything. Have you seen any of the grandfathers? Nobody had seen anything. And in over 20 years, it had gotten so quiet that even the fact that some of the three of the big ones had surfaced, no one still knew what would happen to the fourth, and no one was really talking about them anymore. It was a one-time scenario. Now, Jonas had spent another 3 months digging around there and not finding anything. And so he got into an argument with the owner of the land, the farmer that owned the land, and who was getting $70 a month for the opportunity to, and didn't feel that it was fairly dealt with. And so Jonas left, gave up the space, and he rented it to another person in Valadares, and then the Vasconceloses actually used the space for a few years. But that was really the only thing that was found there. There is talk now, they've resurveyed the property, resurveyed the pegmatite, and there's talk about going back in, but no one's had the nerve to do that yet. In 2016, 3 years ago, amid major corruption scandals and political unrest involving the past and current presidents of Brazil, Dona Edma decided it was time to sell the last of the four grandfathers, the Tarugo. Jonas had held it back for 40 years. He died in 2001, and he believed first that it was the finest of all the crystals. That was his opinion, because he understood that the cutting value of the crystal at that point in time was worth far more than he could get for the crystal itself. So he held it back to cut, but could never bring himself to do it. And then when he died, his wife felt that his spirit actually entered the crystal. So she never let her son talk about it, never talked about it herself, visited the crystal all the time, and had a painting done of it so she could have it in her house, because the crystal was kept away from where anybody could possibly see it, and just said nothing about it for all those years. But because of the unrest, because of the political situation had gotten so bad in Brazil, she decided that it was time for them to leave. And she told Jonina that it was definitely a time for the move to take place. we received an unexpected call from an old friend, Haysem Elawar, who grew up in the business, as we were growing up in the business, much older than he, of course. And, but we'd always stayed in touch. We got to buy stones from his father. We got to spend time with him from time to time. And it was a nice relationship. But he was more on the mineral side of things. We were more on the gemstone side of things. And, but he was his father's son, and took over the business on both sides. So we received an unexpected call from our old friend, who I'd met as a boy on my first trip to Brazil. Haysem told me that his friend, Joninho Lima, was in possession of the tarugo and the family was ready to sell. Given our history and long-standing relationship with him, we were some of the first people he called. We immediately put together a group to acquire tarugo. Given that I was the only one who had ever seen it, I'll bet 40 years earlier, I was the one to travel to Brazil to procure the stone. So the plan was to take the crystal, put it in the box, get it to the airport. Couldn't get it there because the truck would only take the outside case, and the problem was going to be 6-hour drive to the airport with no brinks, of course, 6 hours trip to the airport, and 2 cars following guys with guns, and so we had to go to plan B. Plan B was to put it on a plane with me. Trouble was, the weight of the piece in the box and me were too much for the plane to take, so they had to take all the seats out of the back, and they flew us there. And basically, went through customs, got it home, everything was great. So, get it home, we've got to get it cleaned. We bring it to my friend who is Sander Fuss. He owns the Mile High Mineral Laboratory in Colorado. I met Sander first when I brought one of the emerald crystals from North Carolina to him to repair, and he did a phenomenal job. So I figured he could take care of this. There was a coating on the back of the crystal of almost like a mud that had hardened on it. It was muscovite and calcite and some other material. So to get it off, they were going to have to clean it and get it ready for us. The problem was we were trying to get it to Tucson in February. We missed Tucson because Sander was impeccable at dealing with it, and we didn't understand Sander's excitement. But his excitement in seeing this tourmaline was because he has a tattoo of the pocket on his body. You have to ask him to see it. But he told me I could tell you that. Okay, so, and then we brought it to Tucson the following year in 18, and it went viral within 12 hours, and the world is aware of it, and we've found places for it. Thank you.